Now, with version 2.2 around the corner and featuring two new members of Obol Squad being Seed and Orphie, it still isn't exactly confirmed who will be returning alongside them, but judging from who is left to receive a rerun and the new limited characters themselves, it's quite fair to believe Trigger will be returning in the first phase and Soldier Anby will be returning in the second phase. Those two, alongside Evelyn and Harumasa, are the only characters yet to receive a rerun prior to version 1.7, which means there is a chance either Harumasa or Evelyn could make their return instead. But considering just how well Trigger and Soldier Anby are going to synergize with the new featured characters, it is more likely that we will be seeing the return of our version 1.6 characters. So with that said, I'll be going over the value both Trigger and Soldier Anby hold within their kits, whether or not their signature W engines are worth picking up, then I'll be finishing it up with their overall value and if they are still worth considering for your account. As always, if you are interested in more ZenlessZoneZero content, would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Jumping into this with the amount of value Trigger holds within her kit. Not only is she capable of dealing considerable damage for a stun character, but the most valuable aspect of her kit without a doubt would be the fact that she is capable of dealing damage and inflicting daze whilst off field. On release, Trigger was the only S rank that was capable of dealing aftershock attacks. But now there is also Jufufu, and I do expect there will be many more characters able to perform off field. So she may no longer be the only character able to inflict aftershocks. But it doesn't take away from the fact it's still quite a valuable aspect of her kit and allows her to synergize with many DPS characters that do require a lot of field time. In addition to that, Trigger does have an extremely easy playstyle, since all you would need to do is deal 4 charge shots at the start of battle to fill her gauge, then you would activate the special attack if you are able to, and then switch back out to your main DPS. Also, it's worth mentioning that when dealing those charge shots within her sniper stance, Trigger does have an auto dodge mechanic that ensures you do complete the rotation without any interruptions. Now, with that gauge filled with a max of 100 purge points, Trigger will then be able to deal aftershock attacks that each consume 3 to 5 purge, which is hardly anything, allowing you to not have to keep switching back to Trigger to fill her gauge. Another incredible aspect of her kit is that she is able to increase the stun damage multiplier by 35% when dealing aftershock attacks, though the stun damage multiplier is in fact applied even when the target isn't stunned. So especially considering Trigger will be dealing aftershock attacks for majority of the battle, it would mean in other words that enemies will permanently receive 35% additional damage, which every DPS character, regardless of being an anomaly type or attacker type, can definitely utilize. Lastly, with the fact the additional ability is activated by either attackers or characters from the same attribute, it does provide Trigger with even more versatility and enough to really allow her to play either as the dedicated stunner or even the support in various compositions. So ultimately, Trigger is one incredible stun character with fantastic universal value. Of course, there is the fact she does require a lot of crit rate in order to deal the most damage possible with her aftershock attacks, but with good investment she is quite valuable, and especially alongside damage dealers that do require a lot of field time. Moving on to the poster girl of Zenless herself, Silver Soldier Anby is one of 2 premium electric attackers currently released, and as hype as she was when she did initially drop, that other electric attacker being Harumasa was given for free only 2 version updates prior. So there was a good enough reason for players to skip Anby, since the electric attacker position was already filled on everyone's account. Unless of course you did happen to miss picking up Harumasa in version 1.4. Now even with that said, there is still quite a difference between the two, since Anby in specific is a lot more easy to use and deals a lot more damage, which provides some value to picking her up even if you do already have Harumasa. In addition to that, Anby does synergize quite well within the aftershock meta, as not only is she capable of dealing aftershock attacks herself, but her core passive does also increase the crit damage of aftershocks dealt to marked enemies by 30%, alongside increasing the damage dealt to enemies from Anby by 25%. So essentially, any character with Anby that deals aftershock attacks such as Trigger, Pulchra, or Jufufu, they would be capable of dealing even more damage and contributing towards the team's overall DPS. Also, in comparison to Harumasa, which is more of a burst damage dealer, Anby does take up a lot of heal time and has more of an even spread in damage distribution across her abilities, which does allow her to pair well with other characters such as Trigger that do take up hardly any heal time. Lastly, it's fair to mention there are a number of compositions that you can utilize, including free-to-play compositions that do feature Anby. Given you could use the current premium team consisting of Anby, Trigger, and AstraYao, or a double support composition with Anby, Caesar, and Astra, or a more free-to-play composition being Pulchra and Lucy alongside Anby. So from her damage capabilities to buffing capabilities and team versatility, Anby is a solid character overall and a great electric attacker. However, in comparison to other meta damage dealers, Anby really isn't able to compare and does struggle a bit more within endgame content, which makes picking her up by herself on her rerun not the greatest decision. Although, if you are also picking up characters like Orphie that can potentially deal enough damage to allow Anby to compete with top tier compositions, alongside picking up, or if you already have Trigger to also contribute towards the damage dealt and provide incredible utility, only then would it be worth considering Soldier Anby on her potential rerun in 2.2. Now regarding the signature W engines, it does go without saying they will hold an incredible amount of value since they are tailor-made and would obviously allow each character to perform at their best. Although with Trigger's W engine in specific, it does in fact hold even more value than the standard signature W engine, considering it is the only stun W engine with a crit rate main stat, and as I mentioned earlier that Trigger does require a lot of crit rate, the signature would then allow it to be significantly easier to reach the 75% crit rate threshold to deal the max damage possible with her aftershock attacks. It's not exactly impossible to reach 75% crit rates without the signature since it can be done with good enough investment into her disk drives. But at the same time, you aren't missing out on much if you don't reach 75% crit rate since most of the team's DPS isn't exactly coming from Trigger. So the main stat alone does make the signature extremely valuable but not entirely necessary for Trigger to perform at a good level. Though in addition to the crit rate main stat, there is a 25% defense reduction on enemies hit by aftershocks and a max impact increase of 20%. So alongside Trigger simply dealing more days through her abilities, similar to the stun damage multiplier increase being utilized by any DPS character, the defense reduction is pretty much in the same boat and would allow any DPS to deal significantly more damage. So as mentioned, the signature W engine is quite valuable for Trigger despite it being a bit more niche for stun characters in general. But again, it isn't exactly necessary, and especially when there are alternatives such as the Ice Jade Teapot, the Restrained, Hellfire Gears and Steam Oven as an A rank option that are perfectly viable to utilize. So if you happen to have either of those W engines laying on the side, you can definitely utilize it on Trigger and still allow it to perform incredibly well overall. Now on the other hand, with Anby's signature W engine, with the fact that Anby is a main DPS alone, it does mean the signature W engine will be much more necessary in order for her to keep up with the meta, especially since the main stat does provide 48% crit damage, whilst the passive further increases crit damage by another 30% unconditionally, alongside up to another 30% crit damage when dealing basic attacks, special attacks or aftershock attacks, and a 20% electric damage increase. The signature really does allow Anby to deal a ridiculous amount of additional damage and takes being called a crit damage stat stick to a completely different level. Also, considering just how easy it is to achieve the full crit damage bonus the W engine provides, it will in fact be a viable alternative for many attackers you may already have or do pull in the future. Now with that, there are still some alternatives that are viable, such as the Heartstring Nocturne due to the generic crit rate and crit damage bonus it provides, or the Zanshin Herb Case which Anby can make full use of due to it being tailor-made for Harumasa, or the Brimstone due to the massive attack bonus it provides alongside either the Starlight Engine or Mokato Desire as A-rank alternatives. So just like most characters, there are definitely viable alternatives that can be utilized. But again, since Anby is a main damage dealer that will be putting in most of the work for the team, the signature will certainly allow her job to be much easier and for her to hold a bit more longevity. So overall, both Trigger and Soldier Anby are great characters to consider when the rerun banners do release, though there is naturally a lot more value within Trigger's kit since she is a universal stun character that can perform off-field. So not only does that allow her to synergize with many more characters, but it does mean she will hold much more longevity even without her signature W engine. In addition, with the release of Orphie and Seed next version update, it does mean Trigger will become even more valuable since she is without a doubt going to be incredible with both characters. Whereas with Anby, that is looking to definitely be a great partner alongside Orphie and Magus, Seed does currently pose as a threat since she is also an electric attacker that has potential to perform much better overall than Soldier Anby. So with that in mind, Soldier Anby is expected to still perform quite well overall but might not be the best electric attacker to prioritize in 2.2. Coming up to the livestream, we will of course be able to confirm whether or not C does completely replace Anby or if she does synergize alongside her. But till then, it's fair to say at the very least, Trigger without a doubt will remain just as valuable and arguably even more than when she initially released. Which means for those that especially are considering either Seed or Orphie next version update, Trigger will definitely be a fantastic character to consider to play alongside them and within various other compositions. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more ZenlessZoneZero content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also drop a comment down below on whether you are going to be pulling for Trigger or Anby if they do return next version update. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.